听见资本本期视频为您带来的是大摩根士丹利邢自强在3月12日管理决策层会议上的发言内容，直击中国经济脉搏，内容涵盖了中美贸易的最新动态、全国人大的政策解读，还有中国如何应对通缩挑战。先说关税问题。与2001-18年那波贸易紧张相比，中国企业和政策制定者觉得自己现在底气更足了，因为企业早就开始多元化布局，供应链也升级了，出口的东西从低端货变成了汽车、电池、机器人这种高附加值产品。北京的反应也更冷静，盯着就业和社会稳定看，而不是急着放大招。接着是全国人大，这次的财政和消费政策没啥大意外，基本跟市场预期对得上号，投资者反而觉得这种确定性挺香，尤其是全球市场乱晃，美国经济让人捏把汗的时候，然后是通缩压力。自从去年9月政策转向，经济再通胀已经走到一半路程了，科技行业尤其活跃，像 DeepSeek 这样的企业带着 AI 和平台经济蹭往上窜。可惜房地产和传统消费还没跟上，社会保障改革也才刚迈出一小步。750亿的福利增量听起来多，其实杯水车薪。最后经济数据虽然好坏参半，但投资者愿意往好处想，觉得二手房销售、工程机械这些动静可能是企稳的苗头，加上对美国的不放心和科技的加持，市场情绪短期内还算乐观。这段发言勾勒出一幅复杂又充满看点的经济图景，值得我们好好琢磨。接下来是英文会议的全部内容，如果您需要英文原稿和我的投研助理人工校对的与中文文本，您可以在频道的 Patreon 上获取。
Thank you, Daniel. I'm in the break of between meetings with some policymakers, so apologize if my Wi-Fi is not stable enough to support the camera. But the short answer is comparing to the first trade tensions in 2018, Chinese corporate and the policymakers believe they are probably better positioned this time to deal with tariffs because the firms have been diversifying themselves with operations in other markets to help them mitigating the impact. And the supply chain in China has also moved up. As Rajiv just mentioned in their blue paper, now they are exporting more sophisticated products, including cars, batteries, capital goods, and robots. That means they are more effectively mitigating tariffs given the value-added part of their goods is now higher. That's why Beijing's reaction function to the tariff escalation will be quite reactive. They will monitor the spillover to job market, to social stability, rather than doing some bigger stimulus right now. But we do agree tariff escalation is still negative for Chinese growth and the exports, especially when the cumulative tariff on Chinese goods is already 20%. That's like front-loading some of our base case assumption to the first 2 months into the new Trump administration. Also, more importantly, as Daniel, you have been highlighting in this webcast many times, the pathway to de-escalation is quite narrow between US and China. If you look at the fact on how much they disagree with each other on trade, investment, and the currencies. So despite the recent news noises about a potential summit for both countries to reach a deal, my takeaways from these meetings in Beijing is it sounds quite difficult comparing to 2018 to 2019. This is a very narrow pathway to a deal. Now, that's about the tariff impact. Back to the National People's Congress, my colleague Jenny Zheng and Zhipeng Chai did a lot of briefing in the last 2 weeks with investors. I won't call the National People's Congress a non-event. There were policies on the fiscal budget, on the consumer front, how much they are allocating these resources to boost the consumption or tech. These are being announced by the National People's Congress. But it's probably more or less in line with what the market expected, because since the Central Economic Work Conference in December, policymakers are giving the market enough hints, enough heads up, or they are trying to manage the expectation from the market That's why the MPC came in as expected. But I would say for most investors I met in Beijing and Shanghai, they reacted to this meeting expectation event with some positive stance because they see more volatility in global market, more concerns on U.S. economic growth, and the certainty from Chinese policy, despite it's just meeting expectation, is nothing beyond the expectation. But at least there is no twist and turns. It's largely in line with expectation. So relatively speaking, people feel like, oh, this is giving me some certainty. I like it. So this is very interesting. For the first time in about a decade, people didn't call the MPC or government work report a myth. And the reaction has been slightly more positive. And post the MPC, I would say the timeline going forward, we are tracking how China is fighting deflation. And the progress on reflation has accelerated a little bit since the September pivot. And with the MPC policy package, roughly is probably at 50%. I mean, the 3 R's, reflation, rebalance, and rekindle private sector. Right now, the progress is probably at 50%, up from 10 to 20% before the September pivot. So they made a lot of progress, and particularly on the return of animal spirit for the tech sector. The rise of DeepSeek and the Little Dragons and the meeting between policymaker and the private sector played a very important role. However, so far the animal spirit are still narrowly concentrated in the tech sector, AI adoption, software, platform economy. It's not being broadened to construction, property, or traditional consumption sector. For these things to improve, we need social security reform. China announced that they will provide benefits increase for the very poor people, but we estimated initially it's only 75 billion renminbi. So that's small, that's a drop in the ocean. We think it will take more social dynamics, like the feedback from tariffs, from domestic housing adjustment, the social dynamics on employment and the income, and maybe social incidents like we witnessed in September last year, to help the policymakers to deepen their understanding and shift their fiscal model from public spending on capex on supply side to this social benefits reform. Right now, they are not there yet. They are making some baby steps, 75 billion only for the poor people. But I would say everything is, based on comparison. Most investors I met, including sovereign funds, large insurance firms, they are being more concerned on U.S. growth, U.S. policy uncertainty. And at this moment, this potential impact could be they are looking more inward at China's certainty, despite the policies are still insufficient. But at this moment, the sentiment seems to be still holding up quite okay. In fact, for all this chat book we provided, which Daniel shared, I would call all this recent high-frequency data a mixed bag. But surprisingly, most portfolio managers and institutional investors try to interpret them in a positive way, including the existing home sales of large cities, including some of these discretionary consumer sales, plus this machinery, construction machinery sales in March, since the Chinese New Year. I would call them mixed bag. There is too much noises. And the first quarter is usually good in China, given the front-loaded exports and the SOE production. But more and more investors are in the camp that this may be the early green shoots, showing the economy is stabilizing. So this short time window of improved sentiment due to DeepSeek, due to the concerns on U.S. economy, seems to be still going on. With that, I will stop here and hand over to Daniel.